The desert highway stretched like a black scar across the Nevada landscape. At this hour, 11:47 p.m., it was just him and the silence. David Gellar sat on a plastic stool behind the counter of the Silver State 24/7 gas station, the fluorescent lights above him buzzing with a frequency that felt like it was slowly eroding his focus. He was 40 years old, wearing a faded flannel shirt that smelled like day-old coffee. 3 years ago, he was a forensic accountant with a corner office. Now, he was the night manager at a pit stop in Willow Creek, a town so small it didn't even have a traffic light. His job was simple: sell gas, lottery tickets, and overpriced snacks to the insomniacs and long-haul truckers who drifted through like ghosts. The routine was a consequence of past mistakes. After the divorce and the poor decisions that cost him his career, this was the only place left that would take him. The quiet was his only co-worker, and tonight, it felt heavier than usual. He checked the clock for the 100th time. 12 minutes until the shift was halfway done. To keep his mind from wandering back to the daughter he hadn't seen in 6 months, he did what he always did: he looked for patterns. As an accountant, his brain was wired for it. He noticed that the beer cooler was cycling too often, a sign the compressor was going. He noticed the kid on the day shift kept leaving the coffee station messy. But then he noticed something else. On the log sheet, the one for large fuel purchases, a pattern emerged. Every Wednesday, at precisely 1:07 a.m., a specific tanker truck came through. The company name on the side was Arrowhead Hauling. They always bought a large quantity of diesel, paid in cash, and the driver, a large man with a shaved head, would disappear into the restroom for exactly 17 minutes. David pulled up the grainy security footage from the last 3 weeks. There it was. 1:07 a.m. Every time. The truck, the cash, the restroom. The man never bought anything else. No snacks, no coffee. Just fuel and a long bathroom break. It was a deviation from the norm, a detail that didn't fit the expected routine. And David Gellar, for the first time in years, felt a flicker of curiosity. The following Wednesday, David decided to test his theory. At 1:05 a.m., he unlocked the door to the storage closet. It was a cramped space filled with cleaning supplies and boxes of old map books. He left it slightly ajar. When the tanker truck pulled in, he watched the driver on the monitor. The man, his name badge read Silas, walked past the counter with a nod, heading for the restroom. David listened. He heard the restroom door open, then close. But then he heard something else: the soft squeak of the storage room door. He looked at the secondary monitor, the one connected to the camera facing the back hallway. Silas hadn't entered the restroom. He had slipped into the storage closet. David's heart pounded. He watched as Silas emerged 5 minutes later, a small, square package now tucked under his arm. He then casually walked into the restroom, waited a moment, and came out to pay for his fuel. "Quiet night," Silas grunted, his voice flat. David nodded, his hands steady as he took the cash. "Yeah. Quiet." After the truck pulled away, David grabbed his keys and went to the storage closet. It looked exactly as he had left it. Everything in its place. But his mind was racing. Something was very wrong. For 2 weeks, David documented everything. He discovered that the storage closet had a false back panel. He found it by accident, leaning against the wall while listening for Silas's truck. The wood panel gave way slightly. Behind it was a cavity in the wall. Inside, he found stacks of cash bundled in plastic wrap, and several industrial containers. He understood immediately what it meant. This wasn't petty theft. This was a logistics hub for an illegal operation. The money came in on the truck, and something else went out. He was working in the middle of a smuggling supply chain. The rational part of his brain screamed at him to call the authorities, to quit, to run. But he needed to be sure. He started taking notes, logging the serial numbers on the cash bundles, and documenting the labels on the containers. He was gathering information, not for any official purpose yet, but because it was the only thing that made him feel alert, the only puzzle worth solving. It was a risky situation, and he knew it. But David felt he had nothing left to lose by simply observing. The unexpected happened on a Tuesday. Silas came in a day early. David wasn't prepared. He was in the back, checking the stock, when he heard the bell on the door ring. He walked out to find Silas standing at the counter, his massive frame blocking the light from the entrance. "You're early," David said, trying to keep his voice even. Silas didn't reply. He just stared at David with cold, pale eyes. "I forgot something last week," Silas said. He didn't move toward the restroom. He moved toward the counter, toward the door that led to the employee area. The door David had forgotten to lock. "You've been watching me," Silas stated. It wasn't a question. David instinctively took a step back. Silas reached across the counter, his hand gripping David's arm firmly. "Someone wants to meet you," Silas said, his voice low. He guided David through the store and out the back door, where a dark sedan was waiting. David didn't resist, the man was too large, and the situation too sudden. He got into the car, his mind racing, as the lights of the Silver State 24/7 faded in the side mirror. They drove for 20 minutes into the desert, pulling up to a sprawling, dilapidated warehouse surrounded by old machinery. Silas guided him inside. The air was thick with the smell of rust and motor oil. In the center of the space, under a single bare bulb, sat a man. He was in his 50s, dressed in a simple but expensive-looking wool coat. He was holding a white porcelain mug. This was Victor Fuentes. He looked composed, like a businessman. "Mr. Gellar," Victor said, his voice soft and calm. "Please, have a seat." Silas directed David to a wooden crate. "I apologize for the sudden meeting." Silas can be quite direct. He set down his mug. "You've been taking an interest in my property. You've been documenting things that don't concern you. That is problematic." He paused. "I know who you are. A former accountant. A man who has faced challenges. So, I have to ask myself, why? Why would a man with a second chance risk it?" He leaned forward slightly. "Then I remembered. Your ex-wife, Lisa. And your daughter, Emma. They live in Reno, correct? A man rebuilding his life still has priorities." David felt a chill. Victor explained the situation with a calm precision. "The station serves a specific purpose. Very clean, very efficient. You were never supposed to notice. But you did. That tells me you are observant." He stood up and walked closer to David. "Here is the reality of the situation. You will go back to work. You will continue your duties as usual. The items in the storage closet are not your concern. You will not mention them to anyone. You will not document them. You will simply do your job." He spoke clearly. "If you choose to discuss this with local authorities, it will be complicated. The sheriff's deputy, Thompson, is a busy man who prefers not to get involved in matters that don't concern him. If you decide to leave town, we would eventually need to find you to have this same conversation. It's easier if we just agree now. You keep your job, and your family continues with their peaceful life in Reno. The message was delivered without shouting, without threats. It was a statement of fact. David nodded slowly, processing the information. Silas drove him back to his car. David sat behind the wheel, watching the sun begin to tint the eastern sky. He didn't go home. He drove to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town and sat in a booth, nursing a cup of coffee he couldn't drink. His mind was racing. Deputy Thompson was reportedly unwilling to get involved. The local police were not an option. The FBI? Possibly, but how? A call from a former accountant with a story about a gas station? He needed proof, and he needed someone on the outside he could trust. That left one person, Mike Hollis. Mike was an old friend from college, a state trooper. His jurisdiction was the highway, not the town. He was known for being by the book. David pulled out his phone. He typed a text. "Mike, it's David. I know we haven't talked in a while. I need to see you. It's about something I observed on the highway route. The diner on Route 50. Please." He hit send and waited. 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Be there in 1 hour." David took a deep breath. He was about to share what he knew. But staying silent felt like a choice he couldn't live with. Mike Hollis walked into the diner looking like he had just finished a long shift. He was tall, with the weary eyes of a man who worked nights. He slid into the booth across from David. "You look like you haven't slept," Mike said. David ignored the observation. "I need you to listen to me. Just listen." For the next 10 minutes, David laid it all out. The storage closet, the cash, the industrial containers, Silas, Victor Fuentes, the comment about his family, and the deputy who reportedly stayed out of it. Mike's face remained still. When David finished, Mike just stared at him. "David, this is serious. You're talking about major organized crime. Are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" David pulled out his phone. On it were his notes and the photos he had taken. The stacks of cash. The industrial containers with their labels. The false panel. Mike scrolled through them, his expression shifting from skepticism to concern. "Okay," Mike said quietly. "Okay. If what you're saying is accurate, then we need to be very careful. We need to verify this through proper channels. This is above my level. I know someone in the State Bureau I trust." The plan they discussed was cautious and methodical. Mike would contact his trusted contact in the State Bureau, an investigator he had worked with before. But they needed more than just photos, they needed clear, verifiable evidence of the activity. David realized he had a way to get it. The gas station's security system was outdated. He could suggest an upgrade to the owner, citing maintenance issues, and install newer cameras. It would be a routine improvement. He purchased a new system with his own money, one that recorded high-quality video to a secure online storage location. He shared the access with Mike. The focus was on documenting the next scheduled visit. David went back to work, keeping his routine normal. He avoided any unusual behavior, focusing on the installation. Silas came in on Tuesday night, just for a moment. He stood at the counter, looking around. "New equipment?" he asked. "Old system kept glitching," David replied, his voice even. "Had to upgrade." Silas nodded slowly, then left. David continued his shift, waiting. Wednesday arrived. The day felt long. David went through the motions, his focus on the plan. At 10 p.m., he got a text from Mike. "Contact is monitoring the feed remotely. We have authorization to observe and document. Stay safe and maintain normal routine." At 12:55 a.m., David saw the headlights of the Arrowhead hauling truck approach. He stood behind the counter, his hands resting on the surface. Silas entered, his eyes scanning the store briefly. He walked toward the back, toward the storage closet. David watched on the monitor as Silas accessed the panel, placing a bag inside the cavity and removing the industrial containers. The entire sequence was recorded clearly. Then, the bell on the door rang again. David looked up. Victor Fuentes walked in, dressed in a dark coat, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked to the counter and nodded. "Good evening, David. I thought I'd check on the operations tonight. How has your week been?" David's pulse quickened. Fuentes wasn't expected. "It's been a standard week," David said, keeping his voice measured. Fuentes looked around the store, his gaze pausing on the new cameras. "These are quite clear," he observed. "A significant upgrade." He looked back at David. "You know, I happened to speak with a contact at your corporate office recently. They mentioned they hadn't authorized any major equipment changes at this location." He said it calmly, as if discussing the weather. David felt a knot in his stomach. Fuentes continued, his tone still even. "I value stability, David. I value routines that work. When routines change without explanation, it creates uncertainty." He set his briefcase on the counter. From the back, Silas appeared, having completed his task. He saw Fuentes and stood waiting. Fuentes looked at David. "I'm going to ask you directly, David. Is there a reason for this uncertainty?" The atmosphere in the small store was tense. David knew he had to answer carefully. Before he could speak, a sound emerged from outside. The sound was faint at first, then grew louder. The distinct hum of multiple vehicles approaching rapidly. Fuentes turned his head toward the window. Red and blue lights began to flash, reflecting off the gas pumps. A voice came over a loudspeaker, firm and clear. "This is the Nevada State Police. Remain where you are." In an instant, the scene outside erupted with activity as multiple vehicles converged on the station. Inside, Silas stood frozen, looking at Fuentes. Fuentes looked at David, his expression unreadable. The front door swung open. Mike Hollis entered first, followed by several other officers in tactical gear. "Nobody move," Mike commanded. The situation was contained swiftly and professionally. Fuentes and Silas were escorted out without incident. Mike walked over to David, who was standing behind the counter. "You okay?" Mike asked. David nodded. Later, David stood outside as the first light of dawn crept over the desert. The evidence was secure. His family was safe. Mike approached him. "You'll need to give a full statement, but you did the right thing." David looked back at the gas station, then at the horizon. The routine was broken. For the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face whatever came next.